Good afternoon. Welcome to the penultimate Shiur in this 10-part series. Next week will be our final series. But been enjoying it thoroughly, and hopefully we'll have a good time this week and enjoy as well. I wanted to start off towards the end of the Sidra. If you want to look inside, page 794-795 in the stone. So there is some level of context within the greater Parsha that we might discuss a little bit, and actually Rashi makes that famous assertion at the beginning of next week's Sidra, which is interesting. Maybe we'll discuss that next week, comparing the Lashon Hara of Miriam to the Lashon Hara about Eretz Yisrael. It's an interesting comment, but I think we have some more interesting and puzzling, and if you'll take the words of Rabbi Yosef Ibn Kaspi, just plain wrong. He gets very upset this week. He gets really worked up against Rashi and Chazal and the Ibn Ezra. It's him against the world. So what phrase is it and what words is it in the discussion of, quote unquote, the Lashon Hara that Miriam speaks about Moshe together with Aaron? Miriam seems to get more of the blame, the credit there. Aaron did wrong. He was also reprimanded as well, but Miriam to some extent seems to have started it, which, you know, when it's Lashon Hara, the listener as well as the speaker needs to take responsibility. But realistically speaking, you know, the listener can say, you know, thank you, the listener can walk away, but if the person doesn't speak, then the listener doesn't have a problem, right? If I'm a person who loves hearing Lashon Hara and I can't find anybody to share any with me, I'll be okay, you know? So let's take a look inside here, as a matter of fact, because the language is really interesting. Pasuk Aleph in Perek Yud Bet, around the middle of the page, Vatidaber Miriam va'Aharon b'Moshe al odot ha'isha hakushit asher lakach ki isha kushit lakach. So they were speaking about the fact that he took a kushit, I'm not going to translate that yet, woman, that he had taken this woman that he took. So apparently it was about the woman. Okay, so it's interesting that apparently it was about this Isha Kushi, because as we're going to see, some of the Mefarshim try to take it away from a meaning that the Torah not only states fairly openly, but then reiterates. Let's leave it at that for now. We'll come back to the text in a moment. So, who is the Isha Kushit? So first of all, he's not here yet. Maybe he'll show up later. But I think, yeah, this fellow who was sitting right here on my right was discussing Targum Onkelos with me recently, right? Targum Onkelos dates back. We were discussing to the time of the Mishnah, right? He's considered to be a Tana. He is a Ger Tzedek. He is a righteous convert, right? I think the nephew of the emperor. So in a larger context and discussion about conversion and what people give up for conversion, etc., which was another subject I was thinking about discussing, and maybe we'll get to that a bit at the end, although when I say that, we don't seem to manage it too well, with the exception of last week, in the discussion of Yitro and Moshe's offer to Yitro in this week's Parsha as well. But if we don't get a chance to look at it, definitely take a look yourselves and you know, see what you think, because interesting subject brought up there, very, you know, controversial subject these days. So this Isha Kushit, the Targum Onkelos, is what he's going to do is he's going to basically translate it into Aramaic. And a lot of times, and in this case too, Rashi is going to go based on his translation, right? You basically have a direct, again, person from a rabbi from the time of Chazal, but telling you what the words of the pasuk mean. So what does Onkelos say over here? Shapirta. right? Shapirta, Shapir, she was beautiful. So Kushit, which when we walked in here today, we thought Kush was a country, Ethiopia. We thought Kushit was an Ethiopian. In fact, it refers to, according to Targum Onkelos, beauty. How does that come to be? How has it come to be that the word not only is not talking about a nationality, but it's apparently describing a physical trait? So let's take a look at Rashi. You can look inside if you want to. It's not so important. I'll explain. But what Rashi says is really, he keeps coming back to it. I would say as if he wants to convince us and himself of the point that he's making. Like the fact that he keeps trying to prove the point almost from a different direction and reiterate it, which is not usually what Rashi tries to do. So first he says that Isha Kushit Magid Shehakol Modim Biyafia Kishem Shehakol Modim B'Shachruto Shel Kushi. So why does it mean Kushi? It means that she was beautiful, and it was so clear to everybody that she was beautiful, just as it's clear that a black person is black.
How do we know she was black?
Well, according to this explanation, she was not.
She was not, but there
We'll get there in a moment. There are those who say, yes, she was actually an Ethiopian.
Yeah.
There was actually an Ethiopian woman that we're speaking about. We're not there yet. But I think you didn't understand what Rashi said, which is perfectly fine, because neither did I. I'm not basically, and this is a similar Rashi to another Rashi that could make the top 5 confusing Rashis in the Chumash to me. But maybe I should just learn all of them, and then I'll have a lot more ones that confuse me. But the Rashi, this is similar to the Rashi about Baba Machteret, right? The person tunneling into your home, and the pasuk says, "Im zarcha hashemesh alav," if the sun shines upon you, and sort of unclear what's the relevance of the sun. So he says, well, if it's clear to you that your father doesn't want to harm you, your father being an example, sorry, of someone who doesn't want to harm you, then you're not allowed to fight back in self-defense. So apparently there, Rashi's claiming the phrase, if the sun shines, means it's clear as the sun is bright.
Yeah.
This will all fall into the category of things that Rabbi Yosef Ibn Kaspi is not going to be happy about in a moment, because Rashi himself apparently likes to explain the Torah according to something he calls pshat, which is its simple meaning, or it's true. We've discussed that Rashi isn't really the most pure form of pshat in reality. That would more often be Rashbam or Ibn Ezra, although Ibn Ezra here toes the line with Rashi. He doesn't want to go against Chazal's explanation here, where Chazal have an open explanation. Rashbam, on the other hand, we'll see, does deviate from Zaidi's explanation, okay? Then Rashi comes back, because, he may have confused himself a little bit, and he says, well, don't worry, we know it's true. How do we know it's true? Because it's a gematria. Yafeh. Mara. Kushit is gematria. You're shikoyach. If we have a gematria, then it's clear, right? Even though the gematria is not the same word used by Onkelos, and it's not. So if you got to
that's where they get it from. That's what, I see.
I don't know if that's where it came from.
Oh.
Is the claim? I don't know if he's bringing it as a hint, a reminder, a proof. If you ask me how gematria works and why it works sometimes and not other times, I will tell you I don't really know, and I don't really know if it's sort of silly and a joke or not. I would say there's some seriousness to it from the fact that it's the majority of the commentary of the Tur, the Baal HaTurim, right, who wrote the Tur. So I'll take that seriously to that extent. It's certainly not a parish that I'm going to learn to try to enhance my understanding of Chumash, because it doesn't really enhance my understanding. It tells me cute word things. I have to say, unfortunately, growing up in the school system in New York, and I think it's probably still true to some extent today. Parsha Shiur class always included gematria as well as Chumash class. It's one of these, Ikrei HaTorah that people are reinforcing. That and Midah Keneged Midah is, like the be-all and end-all of what's in the Torah in Jewish education. So hopefully, hopefully there's more to that.
Well, actually, it seems that you have to accept it. It's in the Haggadah, it's in Pesach.
They got the gematria.
Well, that's not gematria. That's a simon, right?
They use gematria.
A simon, right? The tzachadat. Is that what you're referring to?
No, I'm talking about the gematria.
Which
It's the numbers.
Oh, yeah. There's a gematria. Okay, there's different.
You have to accept it. I mean, you don't want to. You'd rather spend your time on Chumash.
There's different gematria.
There's no gematria in the Haggadah?
No, there is. I'm saying, again, the extent of
Then you have to accept it.
the extent of
Because we accept the Haggadah.
the extent of how much it's going to enhance your understanding. That's the
Yeah,
question.
that's what
Okay. Again, I'm sure there's something to it. Just a question of what and how far. Okay. Anyway, so that is Rashi's second comment, and then don't worry, he comes back to it a third time. Ma Talmud Lomar. What are we learning from here? Ela yesh lecha isha na'e b'yafia ve'ena na b'maseh b'maseh v'lo b'yafia avol zot na'e b'chol. Some women are beautiful, but they're real nasty ladies, and some are not nice, but they're really beautiful. But this one was both.
So that's what in other words, that's the interpretation of Akushi in this commentary.
Apparently, he doesn't want to say, "Oh, Kushi's bad," so he wants to reiterate that.
Yeah.
And then he says like this. He says, "Well, actually, really, as you know, since I'm here to give you pshat, I want to explain to you that pshat means when the Torah uses a word that's the opposite of the meaning, that's what's called pshat, right? Just like sometimes, you don't want to put an ayin hara on somebody, right? Al Shem Noyab, on her beauty, Nikra Kushi, she was called beautiful. Ki Adam HaKore et Bino Na'e Kushi. Kidei Shelo Tishlot Bo Ayin Ra'a. So, you don't want to put an ayin hara on there, and you don't tell me I have to believe in his interpretation of ayin hara, because the Rambam doesn't, and many others don't. The Ralbag over there won't either. So ayin hara, maybe yes, maybe no. Apparently, if you tell your children they're beautiful, some mazikin, some spirits are going to come and God forbid damage them. So tell your children they're ugly, says Rashi. So really, we know the word kushik means ugly. By the way, the implication here, first of all, of the Chumash, I don't know, we'll leave the Chumash aside for now. The implication of Rashi, possibly the implication of Moshe, of Miriam and Aaron, that definitely seems to unfortunately be racist to some extent. But I think we can give the Torah, an understanding of context and time and history.
Why didn't the Torah use the Cushite's name?
Not
know the name. Why?
We don't know the name necessarily.
Usually when the Torah just refers to somebody by Ish or Ishor, it's something in a negative nature.
Right.
But if you read
Excellent.
down below, you will find that they were referring to the fact that Moshe denied his wife's
Okay. So in the explanation that it is Tzipora, okay, because we're going to say another explanation that it's an actual Ethiopian woman, right? Okay, but in the explanation that it is Tzipora, so you have an excellent question, and again, this is a question that Rabbi Yosef.
Are you telling me that Moshe had another wife?
This is the other explanation. We'll get there in one moment. But according to, let's stay in the first explanation just for a couple of minutes. According to the first explanation that we're speaking about Tzipora. So first of all, by the way, incidentally, Midian and Ethiopia, Midian being in the Sinai desert, and Ethiopia, out in Africa, aren't the same place, right? And that wasn't a part of the world that's discussed that Ham, who's the father of the Kushim, got in Breshit.
How about Shlomo? Didn't he have somebody at Kushite?
Yes, interesting, but he had a lot of wives. So
yeah, one of them.
Yeah, he had 1,000, but one of them, a more famous one. Beyond that,
where did you find out that Midian location?
I mean, Midjan is in the Navi dealt with, but I mean,
You gave a location on a map.
in the desert. In the desert, I'm saying.
You pinned it down.
Well, because Moshe ran away to the desert of Midjan, right?
Right. How do you know where Midian is?
Well, because it's got to, I mean, assuming it has some proximity, which I could break this assumption a little bit in a moment, but Moshe discovers Har Sinai while he's with Yitro's sheep. So it is not there. In other words, Moshe has taken them, but it is somewhat low. It's not, it's not on the other side of the world, right? It's not 3 countries away.
Midian is located in Sinai.
Well, he found Sinai, the burning bush, when he was with Yitro's sheep, right? Correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, by the way,
How do you know where Sinai was? Nobody seems to know where Sinai was. You've already pinned it down.
do I know where the Sinai Desert is? Why not? Well, who doesn't know where the Sinai Desert
I
is?
don't think it's the same thing. What you think of as the Sinai Desert is what Egypt has now.
Yeah, so that is that.
But that's the Sinai of this.
Well, I think the location that they've got is in Saudi Arabia for Har Sinai, so it could be a. Yeah, I don't know. I don't buy that stuff too much either. I'm not too concerned about that stuff either.
Where else would it be?
But yeah, where else would it be? Right? It's in the general neighborhood, right? I mean, they go from Mitzrayim to Israel, right? So I don't think they stopped off in America on the way and picked up some
I don't think
natives.
Sinai is in the Sinai Desert, as you know.
I'm just saying. Hold on one second, but hold on. You don't think it's in the Sinai Desert?
What would it be?
I don't want to get too distracted, but hold on. You don't think it's in the Sinai Desert? So how did the Jews get from Egypt to Israel? And by the way, they didn't go straight. We know that, but
They went due east and then due north.
okay. So that you want to put it in
No,
Saudi
that's
Arabia?
Sinai.
You want to put it in Saudi Arabia? That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. The archaeological, a lot of the archaeological evidence is in the direction you're saying. That's fine. Right, that's what I said. Yeah, I agree. There is a theory. I agree. Today's science probably backs that up more. So fine, that's fine. It's not 100% relevant. It's not so relevant to this. It's not in Africa. It's not in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is not even in North Africa, right?
On the contrary,
It's in
it's
in South. No,
Ethiopia is in the Horn.
East Africa.
it's
That's East and Central.
East Africa, okay. North, it's northeast Africa.
it's in the Middle East. It's not in the Middle East. I'll tell you that much.
Central.
So that's where the Colossians come from.
Central Africa. Central.
No, it's not necessarily.
Yeah.
Find out where the Colossians come from.
First of all, the Falashas are one group within the Ethiopian Jews.
That is correct. They come from Ethiopia.
Those are the Christian ones. Is that who you're talking about?
Again, today's Ethiopia.
They're all Christian?
No, they're not.
I know.
Half of them are.
I know the Falashas are the
The
Christian.
tribal religions a lot of them.
Um,
Muslims a lot of them, too.
okay. Ethiopia is,
It's in Central, East Central Africa.
yeah, I mean, I've got a map of Africa here, but there's like 65,000 countries in
Yeah.
Africa nowadays. So
Yeah.
anyway, we can look that up later. But
That's
huh? I have a map. I'll get a better one if you want to look at it, because that one wasn't too great. Here, we'll click on
South of Sudan.
the Gulf of Aden. Yeah,
Well, that's.
here it is. Yes. So it's there. It is highlighted. Yeah, East Central, I would say. Yeah,
Central Africa.
sure. But and on the coast and separated by water and etc. Right. Okay. Anyway, the point there being that it's not the same place. Or do you think it is the same place? Maybe it is. But it doesn't really matter, because the truth is, I'll agree with you in a different way as well, and that is that people back then, many people were certainly nomadic to a large extent, and definitely shepherds. And by the way, in Shoftim, which is where we refer again to the family of Yitro, right? So actually, in the beginning of the Sefer, they're down in the south, in Yehuda's area. But when Yael, the wife of Heber Hakeni, kills Sisro, that's up in the Galil. And so the Mefarshim have to explain, why is she up in the Galil? Oh, well, that's the time with the sheep, and they needed area to graze, so they had migrated up to that area. By the way, then later, it's not permanent, because later, when they're referred to again, when Shaul goes to kill the Amaleki, and they're living basically among the Amaleki, that's back down south again. So anyway, we don't need to get into the migration patterns of the Kenites yet. It might become relevant to the discussion soon.
This is not.
But again, so what Rashi says, though, which I find to be strange, and I have at least Yosef Ibn Kaspi to back me up, is that what the Torah is trying to tell us here is that it means the opposite of what it says. In other words, the Torah called her Cushi black, which means ugly. We'll just take that, unfortunately. Huh? Why? Probably due to racial discrimination at that time in the world, right? Somebody who was African black, they were a slave, they were the epitome of ugly. That's what I unfortunately referenced before, and I think Miriam and Aaron certainly reinforcing that, but that is the assumption here. Okay. So again, we want to say she's beautiful, so we say she's beautiful by saying she's ugly. Now, why don't we refer to her by name if it is Tzipora? Because, first of all, the implication, the discussion over here isn't such a nice discussion. The subject under discussion, as we'll see. And although she may have generated the information, according to the Medrash, she generated it by accident. It was a visceral reaction, whereas Miriam repeated it and perpetuated it not only on purpose, but due to personal to personal issues that she had and feelings that she had. Okay, we'll see. We'll see. Hi. Okay, so we'll wait for him to call me back. So how does Miriam find out, right? This is, I'm not going to read this whole Rashi. We're done reading Rashi. We've got 4 different views from Rashi. But Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moshe, and Rashi quotes this Medrash. What does he say? He says that Tzipora is standing with Miriam in the previous Parsha, a couple previous, when Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp, right? I always thought it should be prophesizing. That word bothered me for a couple of weeks, years ago, prophesying. But anyway, they were prophesying in the camp. They prophesied in the camp. So what does Miriam? So what does Tzipora say? Tzipora has this reaction. I feel bad for their wives. What? Well, why do you feel bad for their wives? Well, because when you become a prophet in Eved Hashem, that's it for the relationship. It's all over after that. So again, for her, it was, called Masiach Lefi Tumo. She was just speaking from simplicity, so to speak. She was not putting it out as necessarily a criticism, etc. It was a negative, by the way. It wasn't, right, woe unto their wives, right? Oh, Linashayim is not a nice thing. But again, she wasn't trying to go and perpetuate this and speak to other people about it, etc. So she may have been saved that, being called out by name due to that as well. And again, the whole thing is a little, again, talking about relations and their relationship is also not, maybe something to speak about so openly, right? So first, let's understand Rashi. Moshe has become celibate, right? He's got his Ohel Moed, tent of the meeting, that he goes to prophesy, right? To go and be with Hashem. He's got to be ready at all times. And when the cloud goes up there at the tent, everybody knows, the God is in, do not disturb sign, right? And as a matter of fact, later on, Hashem pulls this funny sort of a trick, when he's showing Miriam and Aharon the distinction between them and Moshe. I'll come back to it, using the Ohel Moed. So Moshe is living there, and he's not living with his family. In other words, his family suffers in the larger context of what is good for Klal Yisrael, which is having Moshe. I'll discuss what it means to have Moshe when I get to the next psukim, because this is where the Torah explains exactly what that special koach that Moshe had and what Moshe was, right? So Tzipporah is complaining about it, but there's something else as well. There could be something else as well, and that is that maybe Miriam and Aharon are upset because up until now, the rulership has sort of been in oligarchy, right? It's been Moshe and Aaron and Miriam. And what's Moshe doing now? He's, oh, come on in, Nevi'im, let's go. 70 you guys, sure, no problem. We can all do it, you know? Till now, it was a very small and exclusive group at the top, right? And now it seems like it's being divided up quite a bit more, and Miriam and Aaron perhaps, and this might not be open, this might not be on the surface, but this argument is very easy to make from not only their words, but then the response to that, because first of all, the immediate response is amazing, right? She says, Vayomru harak ach Moshe diber Hashem, halo gam banu diber v'yishma Hashem. Don't we also prophesy? And we're not separated from our wife, right? We're going to have a problem with this explanation in the next shot, which is that it's not Tzipporah being spoken about. We'll have to put that in a slightly different context. And then the Torah just, as if it's speaking completely out of the blue. Veha'ish Moshe anav me'od mikol ha'adam asher al pnei adama. And Moshe was the most humble person in the whole world. What, huh?
Yeah, how
does that fit into? So I think it fits beautifully. In other words, Miriam, you think this is about your kavod? You think this is about your ego, your honor? Moshe is who Moshe is because he doesn't care about that stuff. Because he's exclusively dedicated to Klal Yisrael and to the leadership of Klal Yisrael. And by the way, sometimes he even goes overboard with it, right? Hashem, kill me, rather than killing the whole nation. I'm not interested. Moshe, you know, hitting the rock. I mean, Moshe can go overboard because he's so dedicated to Klal Yisrael, right? If Moshe's a kanoi for one thing, he's a kanoi for Klal Yisrael, which, if there's anything a leader should be, it's willing to stand up for his people. And that's what Hashem first says to Miriam and Aaron. He'll get into some specifics that we'll discuss. But the first thing is Moshe's honor of me'od mikol adam. So if you think that this is about ego and honor and, hey, aren't we the same? Don't we both? No, you're not. Moshe is qualitatively different than you. And by the way, before I discuss why he's qualitatively different in what way, I'll discuss why in terms of himself, and that he's anav me'od mikol adam. It reminds me of this joke my father used to tell me. The guy's on his deathbed, and the rabbi comes in, and he's, oh, this guy, he was at every Torah class we ever gave, and he gave more than he had even in lean times. I couldn't ask for a better congregant. The guy's wife says, oh, you think he was a good congregant, a husband? We never had a harsh word in 55 years, and he took care of everything, and he never wanted me to work too hard, and so much respect. And the kids say, oh, and he was a father, and oh my gosh, he just, everything, he taught us, and he gave us whatever we needed, and not too much. He didn't spoil us. Father's dying breath. My anivus, don't forget my anivus. So yeah, you know, if you think you're a big anav, you know, you might not be. You know, that's sort of like the lesson to Miriam, right? Is like, hey, aren't I as great? Well, if you're asking, you know, maybe not. You know, Moshe wouldn't have asked that question, right? Let's go to Ibn Kaspi for a moment, because I wanna discuss what his criticism is, the nature of his criticism is, because again, he doesn't leave anybody. Chazal, Rashi, being the erstwhile representative of Chazal, right? Ibn Ezra, who sometimes can be the rational voice. Nope, not here. He says, why are these people distorting and corrupting the Torah by saying that this word means the opposite of what it says? According to that logic, you should love Hashem. Well, maybe we could just understand it to mean you should hate Hashem, right? If the instructions given in the Torah can be interpreted to mean the opposite of their meaning, we have a problem, says Ibn Kaspi. And this is not called elaborating and adding, sometimes outside of the words, but adding and elaborating to the text. This is called, says Ibn Kaspi, corrupting the text and destroying the text. He's not happy with this idea. By the way, I tend to think the Rambam might agree with this assessment based on how the Rambam learns text. The Rambam says a similar thing in his famous letter on Tchias HaMesim, where he's explaining I think it's there. It might be. Okay. He's explaining basically, he says, you can distort anything you want to, any words of the Torah. He says the Christians took Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad to mean the Trinity. So certainly sometimes within the words themselves you can corrupt, but even that is within the words, right? I mean, even that is it says Hashem. This is all the.
I think there are many instances of where instead of saying the word, they say the opposite because it's what they would they don't want to say something that's very negative, and I think.
Well, no, that's not the opposite though. That is a longer way. If I'm remembering the same thing you're saying, Gemara Psachim, etc. That is a longer way to use Einenu Tahora as opposed to Tameh. Right, so the Torah is willing to use more verbiage and waste words to say not right. So that's a little bit different, right?
Okay, yeah.
But by the way, Rabbi Mordechai Breuer, who was sort of like he taught at Gush Etzion, he was sort of like the peak, even more so by a large extent, than even Reb David C. Hoffman, in terms of taking biblical criticism and teaching it in a firm way. And it's interesting and controversial, but one point he makes, I think, is really important, which is, do we think that the Torah interchanges the names of Hashem for nothing? Of course not. In other words, the Torah does use very specific language for a specific reason and a specific purpose. It's not because it had 4 different human authors, right? But the Torah is, and this is where he goes with it, trying to express different points of view with the different names of Hashem, right? And that's obvious in the text. But again, that's more focusing on dafka looking at the words and being meduyak and specific in the words as opposed to saying the opposite. And I gave you another example, by the way, where Rashi says this and Chazal say it, Im zarcha Hashem eshalav, if the sun shines on you. And I think Chazal are yotze completely from a simple meaning. There's a poetic turn to that as well. This is storytelling, so it's different. So what does he say? He has a medrash on his side, by the way. If you ever happen to look up this medrash, as I did a couple of months back, don't be scared. You're not losing your eyesight when you check the source in Divrei Hayamim, right? It says Kidichsiv. This is now the Rashbam. The Rashbam is quoting a source. Because Ibn Kaspi, by the way, seems to believe that Moshe now, at this point, took this Ethiopian wife. I'm not sure why he would take another separate Ethiopian wife at this point. Maybe some political purpose of some sort. Unclear. But the Rashbam, who, first of all, is, older, Rashi's grand, he's more of an authority. Yosef Ibn Kaspi is Miriam Leibowitz quotes him, but she also quotes, Buber. He's on the edge. He's on the cusp. But Rashbam is certainly not, except according to the Art Scroll translators of the Mikros Gedolos Chumash who edit his comments when they're offended by them. K'dichsiv b'divrei hayamim de Moshe Rabbeinu. Right, so actually, it's a sefer called Divrei Hayamim de Moshe, but the way it reads here is Divrei Hayamim de Moshe Rabbeinu Shemalach Be'eretz Kush. It's a medrash called Divrei Hayamim of Moshe, and that medrash called Divrei Hayamim of Moshe tells the story, which I know we've all thought about. You know, Moshe leaves, and I won't get into an argument about this because no, I can't prove Moshe was 20 when he left, and I don't know that I necessarily know he was 20, but he was a young person. He may have been younger than 20, right? In other words, Moshe ran away when he was young, right? He grew up and the thing happened. So maybe he grew up and 20 years passed, but and then he comes back and he can't be that far from 80, because if he was that far from 80, then he's hanging around in Mitzrayim freeing the Jews for a long time, right? And we think it took like 6 months a year, right? And then 40 more years, and he dies, the Torah testifies, at 120 years old, right? So what happened in those 60 years? How is it that the greatest person who ever lived, and we've got 60 years of his 120, he didn't live to 900, it's not like some of the, how is it that that's just a complete blink? So we may be familiar with this story that Moshe was the king of Cush, actually, Ethiopia, for 40 years. So the Medrash says he was the king there for 40 years, and he married this woman for political purposes, but he didn't touch her, right? Now, by the way, I have an interesting sort of, maybe I'm thinking too much about, our modern day discussions between husband and women, but I'm thinking about a sort of way to marry, the two to some extent, which would be that Moshe separates from Tzipporah. Tzipporah is complaining that they're separated. How can you be without a woman? You're not going to survive. And he says, what do you mean? I did it for 40 years once. You did it for 40 years? Yeah, when I was in, Cush, I was married to this woman for 40 years and I didn't put a hand on her. So I got self-control, don't worry. Well, he had sons with Tzipporah.
He had another woman then?
Tzipporah, Yitro's wife. Yitro's daughter, or Chovev's daughter, or Reuel's daughter. Definitely not going to get into that one. The names of, but yeah, he definitely has Tzipporah. He definitely has the children with Tzipporah. The only question is, does he have another wife?
Who's with her now?
Right.
But somebody does the laundry. Somebody has to do the baking, the cooking.
If he was 80 when he left Midian, and he was gone for 40 years, then he must have left Mitzrayim when he was 40.
No, he was 60 years, I said. Why do you say 40?
Well, you said he was in Midian. He got to Midian. What the Torah says, when he came back to Mitzrayim, he was 80.
Right. Well, the Torah doesn't say that, but that's backwards math. That's easy backwards math.
40 years in Midian. So
Well, no, he lived 40 years in Cush, that Medrash says. But there's another 20 years to account for. So who knows? Maybe he discovered America,
We don't see everything about Abraham either. We all,
of course. The Torah's not a history book.
We don't know anything about Abraham until he's a certain age.
But the math is open. Huh?
Even in the mid-bar, they skip a lot of years. Almost like
Yeah, 38 year. Yeah, it skips from the troubles here to the end,
Yeah.
Just
We don't
like
know what's going on that
season
time.
7 of Parks and Recreation. You
What
guys
do-
all get that reference, right?
What do we know about the 38 years? Nothing. It doesn't say anything. No, we don't say anything at all.
I heard that reference somewhere. I haven't gotten to season 7 yet. So Rashbam, by the way, seems to express both notions about why Miriam is upset. Number one, that because he had another wife, but later the Rashbam has to contend with the next pasuk, Miriam and Aaron being shown the uniqueness of Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy. So what's the context of that vis-a-vis him having a ishakushi, right? In other words, he thinks he's better than us. What does that? What do you mean? What does that have to do with a wife he had 40 years ago? However, again, that may be related to the feeling of not being special due to Eldad and Medad being revealed, right? Now, and by the way, Moshe says, "I can't do this alone." Right? Oh, you're alone? Oh, I thought you had your loving brother and sister helping you out, but you feel that you're alone. Okay, so let's go back into the psukim, okay? And Pasuk Gimel, Pasuk Gimel, we read it, Isha Moshe Anav Ma'od Mikol Ha'adam Asher Al Pnei Ha'adama Vayomer Hashem Pitom El Moshe Vel Aaron Vel Miriam Tzu'u Shloshchem El Moed Vayetzu Shloshtem. So he brought them into the Ohel Moed. Vayered Hashem Ba'amud Anan Vayamod Pesach Ohel Vayikra Aaron and Miriam Vayetzu Shneim. So this is great, right? Hashem says, okay, everybody who's a prophet from the family of Amram and Yocheved, come with me. We're going to have a prophecy party. Okay, all right, we're in the tent. Okay, now we're going to have a really special prophecy party. Anybody who talks face-to-face with me can stay, and everybody else, if you could step outside for a minute, right? Again, he's showing them the uniqueness of Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy. You have it to some extent, but you're not on the same level. The answer to Miriam is no. You are not equal to Moshe. You and Aaron are not the same. How so? Pasuk Vav now. Vayomer Shimuna Dvarai Im Yihye Neviachem Hashem B'mare Alav Et Vada B'chalom Adaber Bo Lo Kain Avdi Moshe B'chol Beisi Ne'eman Hu El Pe Adaber Bo B'mare V'lo B'chidut Hashem Yavid Madua Lo Yeritchem Adaber B'avdi Moshe. But basically, other prophets have what he describes as a mar'eh, a vision, right? It is not clear, right? A riddle, a chalom. Moshe is face to face. Moshe has direct contact with Hashem, right? And so Miriam, yes, Moshe's nevuah is qualitatively different than every single other one, right? Hashem says the Rambam has one ikar on nevuah and a whole separate one on Moshe's prophecy. Don't you know that, Miriam? Right? No, he doesn't say that to Miriam, but it's true, right? In other words, the Rambam discusses what prophecy is and how important it is to Klal Yisrael, and he has a whole separate ikar about Moshe, right? And the uniqueness of that prophecy. Now, this line, let's see what it says in the English. I'm interested, right, what it says in the English. Not so is my servant Moshe. In my entire house, he is the trusted one. And I didn't see, I'm sure if I look long enough, I'll find this. I didn't see any Mefarshim explaining
what that means.
Well, I saw some explaining what that means. I can tell you, just in terms of if we look in the Mikras Gedolos, who did I see over here? Oh, I don't know if it was in another sefer, but I saw they said that basically they are like family members, etc., talking about the closeness. I think there's something else there. I think this idea of the whole Beisi Ne'emanhu is actually the crux of the idea, in my opinion, that Hashem is expressing here, which is why Moshe needs this other level of nevuah. In other words, Hashem could create 20, 30, 100 prophets on the level of Moshe. Hashem could have a prophet in every generation that he speaks to face. Hashem chooses not to, right? That level of revelation is not positive. Let's rewind to our first Shiur. Maybe some of us remember that, where we were discussing the pre-tzaddik, Rav Tzadok HaKohen's idea of a chachma being a maila over prophecy. So prophecy is necessary. I said then that the prophecy seems to be necessary in the infancy of a nation to sort of get some fundamentals and grounding in ideas and in belief. But anything you can do on your own, anything you can do by yourself that you earn b'ziyat apecha tocha lechem, right, by the sweat of your brow, is going to be better. So certainly having, I mean, we know this. This is like one of the most obvious theological, questions that people ask. And to somebody with a little experience in the world, we always think of the answer being not so difficult. Well, if Hashem is there, why don't I just see it so clearly, right? Why doesn't Hashem just reveal himself to me on the street corner? Because there has to be something called Bechira, right? If there was if Hashem's revelation was so clear, then there wouldn't be any choice, right? I think I mentioned that there's even a way to view that after Har Sinai, when Moshe was on this face-to-face level, he didn't have Bechira anymore. You can't have that level of revelation with Hashem and retain your free will. It's not possible. And by the way, further than this, if Moshe is no longer living a free will existence, why is he alive? Right? You're alive as long as you have a purpose in this world.
Well, he had a good purpose in this world.
But he had a good purpose in this world. He had to teach the Torah to Klal Yisrael for the 40 years in the desert, right? The Torah developed.
There wouldn't be no Torah without.
So again, his entire mahus, there would be no Torah with that, right?
Yeah.
So his entire mahus, his entire essence, his entire purpose after Har Sinai is to teach Torah to Klal Yisrael, to be a kli for Bechol Beisi. Yeah. They all trust him. They believe in him. They know that he's the one prophet who has that direct prophecy, right? I mean, just in the daf, yesterday, today again, I always note it, and I want to look into it further and try to, when the Gemara seems to be teaching a drasha that's a remez or an asmachta, and it doesn't say it. In other words, when the Gemara seems to be trying to prove something from Tehillim or from a pasuk in the Navi, because we know that's not true. We know that there were not new laws taught in the Navi, right?
Yeah.
We've got one law book, and it's the stone edition of Art Scroll, that's not the Saperstein. Sorry. It's the stone edition of the Chumash, not the stone edition of the Tanakh. They're both stone. He gave twice, Kefil. But right, in other words, this is not the book of law. This is the book of law, right? The law was closed in terms of biblical deoraisa law, seemingly, right? The derivation of it, etc., it's a different story, and certainly the plenty of Torah Sheba'al Peh. So again, to review, Miriam challenges the uniqueness of Moshe Rabbeinu, and Aaron, I guess, accedes to that to some extent. Her taina being, isn't Moshe a Navi and we're Nevi'im? Why is his, does he think he's better than us?
Yes.
Well, Hashem says no.
On the contrary, he's the only one that showed leadership. Miriam and Aaron show no leadership. They have to be told what to do.
Miriam wasn't told what to do at Shiras Hayam.
That was later.
That was earlier.
Earlier?
Yam Suf, when they crossed the Yam.
So she was dancing over there. But show me who's the leader of calling this wrong in all these circumstances.
And I agree with you. And Moshe, I'm almost brought to tears by that.
Who takes command and tells the Jews what to do?
And not only that, criticizes them when they need to be criticized, and stands up for them at personal risk and says, I'm throwing in with them.
Show me when Aaron did that.
Agreed. I agree. No, I agree. Moshe is the pinnacle of leadership. And they're not. And they're not. And that's what Hashem says. You are not. He is Anav Me'od Mikol Other.
They're saying yes, and I'm saying that they couldn't be because Moshe was
Right.
on a much
You're
higher.
right. You're right.
He had more
Absolutely.
responsibility.
Right. With great power comes great responsibility.
And that's one of the reasons
Peter
why
Parker's
he
uncle.
had to
No, Uncle Ben.
divorce himself, so to speak, from Zipporah.
Yeah, because he couldn't be a human being.
He both.
He couldn't be a human being. He literally could not be a human being. He couldn't live in this world. And again, you know,
And Zipporah understood that, and that's why she said.
but she harbored some bitterness, it seems.
Naturally, any person, why fault her for that?
Yeah, and the Torah doesn't, right? That's what I was saying to you. The Torah is protecting her as if to say, to pull it back to what you asked before, why doesn't it say? The Torah is not faulting her. A person is not expected to not be human and have emotions. And when she saw that and had that visceral reaction, the Torah doesn't even mention her by name. It gives Miriam, what are you doing? You're taking this hurt sister-in-law of yours that you're claiming that you're comforting her and trying to help her, and you're taking her words and trying to, you know, corrupt them and use them for your honor. And that's, yeah, I agree with you. I agree. The thing is, unfortunately, Moshe, his wife did suffer, right? And we said also his family did suffer, right? In Shoftim at the end there, there's a veiled reference to the grandson of Moshe serving as a, right, Baal, it says Menashe with the nun raised to hint that it's Moshe, unless, and there's a lot of Gershoms around, probably not. It makes sense, right? The person is being told what a great family they come from, but they're not maybe getting the hands-on, right? There's the lack of hands-on showing you how to do it, right? It's so busy with everybody else. Now, to one extent, by the way, we see this unfortunately a lot throughout Jewish history. We see those, you know, some great leaders who lost some children, whether it was to converting to Christianity, whether it was to secularism, etc., right? On the other hand, I think that can be compensated for and has been compensated for to a large extent by the home, and having a strong home and a strong mother who's teaching the Judaism intrinsically and inherently, right? This is the thesis of Rav Soloveitchik's son, Chaim Soloveitchik, great from historian who has a famous essay, Rapture and Reconstruction, discussing what we lost from before the Holocaust till after. He was saying that we lost sort of this tradition of how to raise your home, how to raise your kids in a Jewish home, what a Jewish home is. He was saying that we used to be people who learned from watching and learned from example, and we turned into people who say, well, I don't care what my family minhag is. Mr. Brewer says like this, or, you know, I see in a book that it says that minhag is not a good minhag, and your family's been doing it for 500 years. And by the way, if you had a seichel to speak to a human being, they would probably tell you, of course you keep that minhag, right? I mean, Yaakov Kamenetsky felt very strongly about keeping these minhagim, even if it wasn't necessarily in line with a Mishnah Brura. Not that he didn't regard, you know, the Chavetz Chaim strongly, but if you have role modeling and if you have examples, that's much, much, much stronger of a statement than learning and being told and doing homework and all of these type of things, right? Is the modeling.
Right. The Moshe's support was not a good enough person to raise her kids as somebody else, because she didn't have the time. She had to do everything.
You know, Tzipora, it's very interesting you say that because this issue, I think, is highlighted a lot of times in Balei Teshuvah who come from the outside and didn't grow up in that system and didn't grow up with that tradition. And Tzipora does come from the outside. And by the way, if the criticism of Miriam and Aaron is referring to an Isha Kushit, Tzipora, an outside, they may have an issue with him marrying Tzipora as well. In other words, why didn't Moshe marry from the family of Yaakov, right? Why is he he thinks he's better than marrying his first cousin, like all the great, admire him. I mean,
yeah, that's something.
so there is something interesting. I said before, it's like a sort of it is the xenophobic, racist sort of notion, but like, Moshe's and by the way, the reality speaks, against that. The greatest person who ever lived, married somebody from the outside, right? And by the way, I heard a beautiful explanation once for why the Torah, which we now, of course, it's disgusting, and we have this reaction, but would we have that reaction without the Torah? The Torah bans incest, right? The Torah bans marrying within your own family, within certain parameters. And again, we're disgusted by it because we've become disgusted by it. But in reality, it might seem natural. I don't have the words, but I saw a description of a guy who strangled his roommate in prison because the guy was rationalizing to him this act. So he may have said these type of things, but he knew what the guy did. So he said, I went down to his bunk in the middle of the night and strangled him because I didn't want to hear somebody rationalizing that. So again, it's not okay. But what's the answer? What is the Torah trying to teach us? You do not find perfection by staying within what you know and within your own family. Your own family and their ideas about Judaism and their values, you've got that. You've got to spread out and expand your experience to find perfection, right? So that is the idea of marriage, and marriage not to somebody who's just like you, right? But rather to somebody outside. It's sort of like a worship of the self, to say, oh, this one's perfect, they're just like me. So again, certainly that's not a value to the Torah, but Moshe does marry an outsider. Moshe does marry somebody from the outside, and it wouldn't be so far-fetched that people had some negative ideas about that as well.
She's an outsider. She's definitely an outsider. She's not part of she's not really part of the society that Moshe is in.
Which, by the way,